the voice in my head is often a wildly unreliable narrator. Like, it's not an objective kind of like, I'm seeing the truth and I'm letting you know the truth, even though it will say, this is the truth and I'm letting you know the truth. I heard someone say once, why do I believe the dark negative thoughts in my head, mostly about myself, are truer than the ones that are kinder and more compassionate? And I don't know why the brain is designed that way, but it does seem, they've done studies that like negative thoughts are like Velcro to our brain. They just kind of ask any actor, do you remember the positive reviews? And they'll say no, but they can quote the negative reviews verbatim.
Welcome to Grow with Robin Breckenridge, a podcast about stepping into the most fully expressed, aligned, and conscious version of yourself. Here, we dive into the real work of personal growth, establishing boundaries, understanding your patterns, building self-trust, healing emotional wounds, and creating relationships that feel safe, authentic, and fulfilling. I'm Robin, a life and relationship coach, and in each episode, we'll explore the tools, insights, and conversations that will help you not just improve your life and relationships, but truly transform them. You don't have to just go through it. Let's grow through it, and let's do it together. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Grow with Robin Breckenridge. Today is such a special episode for me. I am joined by someone I not only deeply admire as an artist, but also as a human being. Josh Radnor are you ready for this bio? This was a fun one to read. Is an actor, writer, director, and musician. Originally from Columbus, Ohio, a Midwesterner like me. And as an actor, he starred in television shows like How I Met Your Mother, Hunters, Fleischman is in Trouble, which, by the way, my sister told me that is her favorite show of all time, Rise, and Mercy Street. His film work includes Afternoon Delight, and he's also performed on Broadway in The Graduate and Disgraced, along with other stage productions. Josh has wrote and directed 2 feature films, Happy, Thank You, More Please, which I've seen and it's amazing, and Liberal Arts, both of which premiered at the Sundance Film Festival, with the former winning the Audience Award. Musically, he's put out 2 albums with Australian musician Ben Lee as Radnor and Lee, and as a solo artist, he's released the EP One More Then I'll Let You Go and the double LP, which is one of my personal favorites, Eulogy Volumes 1 and 2. He currently lives in Brooklyn with his wife Jordana and their dog Nelson, who I've known since he was a puppy. But beyond all that, what has been the greatest gift for me personally has been witnessing Josh's journey up close. I've seen the courage and the bravery it takes to interrupt old patterns, to self-parent, and to create an aligned life. One that at times I don't know that he was sure was even possible for him. I've watched him soften into greater kindness with himself, grow more emotionally attuned, and then carry that into a beautiful, authentic partnership with his now wife, Jordana. So what strikes me most is how Josh continually chooses growth over comfort, truth over illusion, and love over fear. I'm going to cry. Sorry. He has shown me, and now shown all of you, what it looks like to live with intention, to do the deep inner work, and to allow that healing to ripple outward into art, relationships, and the way he shows up in the world. And that is why I wanted to have him here today on the podcast, because I know so many of you will see yourself in Josh's story. The way he has engaged with his own inner work, boundaries, intimacy, attachment, and the different parts of himself is not only inspiring, it's deeply relatable. My hope is that this conversation gives every listener both insight and encouragement for your own path forward. How about that for an opener, Josh? I was like so excited to read your bio.
It's so funny because I've had such a lazy morning where I can sometimes feel like, what am I doing with myself? And then you say all that and I'm like, well, it sounds really impressive. Maybe I'll get back to some of that.
It sounds very impressive. But my favorite part was the part that I wrote, even though like, you are such an accomplished artist and human being, to be able to witness the bravery and commitment to yourself that I've witnessed since I've known you has been such a gift. So I'm going to start off by asking you a question. Just tell me a little bit about where you were emotionally when we first met and you began this particular work
Yeah.
with me.
Well, can I share just the kind of serendipitous way we met each other? As I feel like
I would
there's
love it.
something, I had a meditation teacher years ago who told me when you commit to a path of awakening, when you just say to the universe, like, and I don't mean awakening in any sort of like mystical sense. I just mean like, we want to wake up, we want to heal. He said the right books and quotes and teachers and people and friends just magically appear. And I think it was the fall of 2020, which, as we remember, was a pretty provocative,
Mhm.
destabilizing time. I was in Arizona seeing a dear friend, and I met a guy who I just felt kind of simpatico with. I felt like we talked, and there was some overlap in terms of like wounds or struggles or things we had been working on and tripping up on. And but he seemed to have some inner knowing, and he seemed to have some peace about him. And he said, "There's a woman that I've worked with, that I've been working with in Michigan. Her name is Robin, and she's helped me more than any therapist I've ever had around some of this wounding around relationship and attachment style and stuff." And before he even finished, I was like, "Give me your number." Like, I need to connect with this person. And I think like I got back from Arizona and I reached out and we just dove right in. So where was I? I mean, I was what? I would have been 45, 46, maybe around that. I'm 51 now. Um, and I had what I like to think of as like when someone has a chronic illness and they've been to every doctor and every hospital and they've had every test and no one can quite tell them what is going on, but
Sure.
something's wrong. Like, something is wrong. And I was both obsessed with finding a relationship, and repelled by the idea of a relationship all at once, which put me at real odds with myself. I longed for closeness and intimacy, and I also pushed it away whenever it came close because it felt like it was threatening. My wife Jordana is a psychologist, as you know, but she simplified anxious and avoidant very strongly for me, like very clearly for me. Um, the question is, when intimacy comes towards you, do you fear primarily abandonment, or do you fear engulfment?
Mm.
And it was just so simple. It's such a simple question to ask yourself. And for most of my life, I have feared engulfment. So I guess it was no surprise that I reached my mid 40s, unmarried, um, and really rolling kind of alone, sometimes in really pleasurable ways. I mean, I had a really robust, interesting life, creatively, socially, spiritually. But there was this big piece that I could not figure out why all the other dudes from my high school could figure it out. There was something I started to feel like in my 20s, I felt like I was behaving like everyone else. And then in my 30s, I was having this really big public success. And when you're having that kind of success, people leave you alone around this
Mm.
stuff. So it was kind of up to me. I was about to turn 40, and I was like, I have zero idea how to have a relationship last longer than 6 months to a year. I seem to pick people that it's almost like designed to fail. Like, there's something in the people I'm picking that is like the obituary is written in the overture, just like it's not going to last. There's going to be a reason. And I knew it, but I also deluded myself into not knowing it. So I was really at odds with myself around relationship. And through my work with you and others, of course, it's an inside job. It's not. I'm not a victim. I'm not. The universe is not just throwing me these strange people to tease me or ridicule me. I needed to do some internal work. And that's really what brought me to you, was this question of why, I guess, like, the main thing was I felt this unlocatable and even almost untraceable level of shame where I thought I tried to be a good person in the world. And I think I largely was from like an ethical, moral standpoint. But I had this roiling sense of wrongness or offness, or like there was something maybe wrong with me that a person was going to see eventually. And my relationships were a little bit like, you can't fire me, I quit. Like a little bit like, I'll get out before you see that thing. And so I think that's kind of what brought me to you. Is that enough to tee it up?
I think it's beautiful. So, just so you know, the person that you were talking about that introduced us was on the podcast. Ben was I think he was my third guest that I ever had. So if people are continual listeners, they know him and his magic. And that's what I love about this work is that, it's like we can spread the darkness so easily, but the consciousness spreads too. And we share these things. And sometimes it's not even in words. Sometimes we just are around someone's energy and we go, we want what they have. Tell me more about what you're doing.
Yeah.
But I think you teed it up beautifully. I think what you're talking about is that nagging sense of shame that always feels like we're defective or different, or that there's something wrong with us. And it was one of my favorite go-to relational techniques, which was abandon before I get abandoned. And I think that part of like, I can't let people close, but I can't let them go either prohibits us from being witnessed, which is a safer place if where we were witnessed meant that we were rejected or we were under a microscope or we lost ourselves because the other person that we're enmeshed with, their feelings, their opinions, what they want of us becomes our truth.
Yeah. So I heard I heard something yesterday I thought was so wonderful. I leave the ones who love me and I love the ones who leave me.
Oh, you always got such good quotes.
Anyone who knows me knows I'm like a quote maven. I tend to remember them with like startling accuracy for some reason. It's just a weird superpower I have. But I also was, there was a feeling. This is another thing from my wife about that. I forget who said this, but children are often faced with a very terrible choice, which is authenticity or connection.
Yeah.
And most of us choose connection because how could we not?
We actually need it to survive.
Right. So we test out, okay, I'm going to be authentic. And then that doesn't go so well. And if we don't have a parent, I think, who can really mirror and really hold that tension, we feel like the love gets pulled away from us. And we feel very quickly the swift kind of retribution of like, you do that again, you might not stay loved or safe or fed or connected, and these are all like young kind of almost sometimes pre-verbal kinds of things. Right. So I think that I was afraid in relationships that if I was truly authentic, I would cause irreparable harm or strain on the relationship, or the person was not going to want to be with me, or I wasn't going to want to be with the person. Like there was something I didn't realize that there could be freedom within a relationship to actually deepen into my authenticity. I always thought it was going to be a battle between my authenticity and connection.
Oh, goodness. So, when I first met you, not only was it like pandemic time, but I also had just left a company and was going out on my own. So this is probably something you don't even know, Josh, but like when I first introduced you to the boundary pyramid, like I like went on and made it on my computer because I didn't even have like exercises created yet. Like that's how new you were to me being on my own. And I remember you kind of giving me some background of what was going on in your relationships. And I was like, we got to hit boundaries. So it was one of the first things that we talked about. So tell me a little bit, because what you're describing is that when we're younger and we have to prioritize connection over authenticity, we don't have a luxury of boundaries, right? Because boundaries help us be able to shift into our authenticity or what's true for us.
Right.
So what ends up happening is we go into relationships, and because we don't have the muscle of setting boundaries, we'll put walls up. So either we'll be boundary less or walled off, right?
Mm-hmm.
So tell me about, like, when we first met, what was your concept of boundaries at that time? Because I know you've done a lot of work on yourself. You're very well read, got all the quotes. Where were you then?
Well, again, like I said, I was I had some sort of soul sickness that no one had ever crystallized or kind of synthesized. Like, I had never been given a diagnosis. And I know that sounds kind of grand, but it really felt like I know something's off. I cannot sustain a relationship. I don't even know if I want a relationship, but I also long for it on the deepest level. And to complicate matters, and we don't have to get too far into this, the weird postmodern, mind screwiness of it all was that I played a guy for a decade on TV who was like obsessed with relationships and obsessed with finding his wife so he could have this children and have a perfect, you know what I mean? So I was modeling culturally something that I myself was finding impossible to do. And it felt like a secret, like, oh, you think I'm that guy? I'm actually the opposite of that guy. Like I'm running away as fast as I can, people would say, I would always say the character I played had to be careful not to get married on the first date. I had to be careful not to get divorced on the first date, because I would just be sitting across from someone being like, well, that's going to be a problem. Well, I know when that's going to come back. I'm not going to like that in a month, And I was just merciless with plotting exit strategies and figuring out how to get up close enough to get a little intimacy and a little love and a little connection. And then I would panic and I would pull away. And I was also, I could fall into instamacy. I would say way too much, way too quickly. And then I would panic and pull away. I mean, it wasn't until I really started looking at some of this stuff that I was able to take away this idea that I was the victim in all this. And in fact, see, I was a difficult person to date. And it gave me a lot of sympathy for my exes, because I thought that I could go down a list and say, no, this is why I couldn't be with this person. But the truth is, like, no one could be with me because I refused to drop the thing that was going in my head. And how does this relate to boundaries? I mean, I just know that when you share the boundary pyramid with me, you had me define what each of them were. Like, so at the top is sacred, and then trust, and then common interests, cordial, no contact at the bottom, right?
You got it. Look at that. So
you had me write out, like, what does it mean? What are the qualities of a person who would be in sacred? What are the qualities of a person who would be in trust? How would you define common interest? Where would why would you put someone in that category? And I realized that some people that I considered very close in my life actually they didn't belong in trust and sacred. Because one of them was, I want them to have done some codependency work, and I want them to not make their emotions about me and my emotions about them. So you asked me about certain people who I said, oh, no, they're in trust or they're in sacred. Have they done codependency work? No. Do they make their emotions about you and your emotions about them? Yeah, all the time. And you said, they're in common interests. And it was startling for me. It was a little bit like, it's the classic Al-Anon thing. Like I was going to the hardware store for milk, right? Like I was seeking out certain things from certain people that were not appropriate to seek that out with.
But maybe familiar.
Familiar. Exactly. Yeah. So the rejection of realizing they didn't have milk at the hardware store was familiar to me. It almost felt like love, you could say, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
The boundary pyramid landed on me so much that, in fact, the night I met my wife, one of the first things I told her and her friend Anna when we were talking was about the boundary pyramid. And they were like, will you send this to us? So it played some role in my courtship with my
Yeah.
future wife. Yeah.
Do I remember that Jordana said something like, "I'm going to get in that trust category,"
Oh
or
no,
to herself, right?
she wanted to be in sacred, and she is now. But I said to her, I was like, "No, you're not." I mean, even when we were engaged, I think I was like, you're not there yet."
Oh, but how neat. I mean, that's what I love, that you guys have this like shared language and understanding. So I want to say a couple things about what you just shared. What I love about that particular part of that exercise, Josh, is that we typically don't slow down to define what safety means for
Right,
us through like what the characteristics of what other people bring. Like it just seems like one of those things where someone might be like, "What does safe mean to you?" And you're like, "I don't know. I just know."
right,
But I know that for me, sometimes like what I felt like was safe without getting curious, or what I thought felt like home, had a lot of dysfunction in it, or had a
yeah,
lot of like familiarity that I was just used to. So that's the one part of that particular exercise where I think it's magic, because we start to really hone in to like, oh, wait, I need way more than just this one thing in order to feel safe. And it
yeah,
becomes this kind of concrete vetting system that we have written out. And then one other thing, just to comment on what you shared, I love that you were able to look in the mirror and be like, okay, these things happened to me and they impacted me, because sometimes we are a victim to things in relationships. But to also look in the mirror at you, because that's what relationships are here for. They're just big mirrors to like illuminate things within us. And I know that I had an experience one time where like I had learned what manipulation meant, that it meant someone's altering what they're doing to control an outcome. And I started thinking about it in my life, and I was like, okay, oh my gosh, I've been a victim to this so many times. This is so unfair. And then I said the statement to myself, have I ever done this? And like, it was immediate. Like I could have thrown up on the ground. I was like, oh, I'm doing it everywhere.
yeah,
And suddenly I had like compassion, not to that it negates holding other people responsible for what they've done, but this mirror of like, oh my gosh, I have these patterns too. I'm taking people hostage in my emotional experiences and not even realizing it. And if self-esteem comes from doing esteemable actions, I'm not building esteem in that.
right, right.
And I don't even know I'm doing it.
You know, we've talked a lot about 12 step, and I found a lot of healing through 12 step. And I think one of the holiest and most useful questions in all of 12 step, and maybe in the world, in the fourth step, what was my part? Like, what was my part is, even if it's like you were like 100% a victim, you were a child. Let's say you're examining something. To say what was my part was, well, I continued to bring this into adulthood and I re-traumatized myself and other people for years. Like you can own that and say, I wasn't responsible for what happened when I was however old, but I certainly have to take some ownership over my behavior now as an adult. And I just think, Jesus's thing about the plank in your eye, like the speck in someone else's and the plank in your eye, like there seems to be a human tendency to offload dark, shadowy, negative stuff onto others while retaining us as these virtuous, heroic beings who would never do that, who would never be that way. But I think real maturity lies in, shadow, bringing it forth, looking at it, and also just saying, this is a part of me. This is part of everyone. There's a wonderful story about Carl Jung where a patient of his said, there was not a single thing you could say to him that he would shame you for or look down on you for, because he had so interrogated his interior that if you confessed to murder or crime, he knew the criminal within him. He knew the murderer within him. So there was no distance between you and him. I have a friend like that in 12 step, and I tell him constantly, there's not a single thing I could say that I could think not to say to you because I would be embarrassed. He is the most transparent person about all of his missteps, all of his foible, all the shadow, all the darkness, and he's told all of us. And it makes me feel incredibly safe because I can go, okay, I had this crazy thought, or one time I did this thing, and humiliating. And I would never worry about saying it to him because he has done all that work.
You know, I feel like there's so many times in this work as a coach, and this is kind of what I love about the lack of ceiling that I have as a coach versus being a clinician. Like, I can talk about myself, I can
Yeah.
tell you stories, and I can be the empathetic witness, because I know for myself, there was a time where I was holding on to something that I thought kept me so separate from other people. And the place of support that I was going to, she said, I did that too.
Yeah.
And this is someone that's like sitting all dressed up, looks like she has her life together. And I was like, wait, what? You, someone that has what I want, did what I did. And in that moment, I got to be a human learning
Yeah.
instead of this person that's supposed to have it all figured out.
Yeah. There's that thing of like, when we kind of lead with, accomplishment, like all the things we've done, it breeds comparison and competition. But if we lead with vulnerability, it breeds community. There's something so relieving about hearing, I did that too. I mean, that's another thing that 12 step was the perfect model, because it's addicts leading other addicts. It's broken people helping broken people. And in that relationship, you both heal. I find that so achingly beautiful. And I so appreciated in our work together. I loved hearing that you had done this stuff. I loved hearing what your stuff was. And it's true, if you're a psychologist, I mean, even still, I think it's loosening a little bit in psychology. Like, certain people might want a clinician that they know has these whatever biographic attributes or something. But by and large, there's still a kind of like, mask up of impartiality, and I'm just here. But there was something, I loved learning more about you because it made me trust you. Like when you said, I did this for years and here's how I stopped doing it. I didn't feel like I was being lectured from a textbook or a formula, but from a person with like actual lived experience. And that is worth its weight in gold.
Well, it's what I've said on this podcast a million times and to all my clients. Like, I'm a student of this work as much as your one-liners, or you've come in so many times and gone, have you read this article? Have you read this book? Like, I've learned so much from you and your journey. And I'm not going to go on a tangent of this, but like, there's a part of society that makes me really sad, that like, in sometimes 12-step rooms where we have to, like have anonymity and be in the basement of a church, is where we tell the truth,
Right.
is where we show the human sides of us. Because I know this work has taught me, like, I hid those sides. I tried to exile those sides before. And then like sitting across from people, knowing like, oh, these are the deepest, darkest secrets. And if I told you up front, you probably wouldn't pay me money to come ask me for advice, right? But like when that happens and I can go, Josh, I did that too, and I overcame it, and I struggled as long as you did, it makes it all purpose driven. Like, oh, this happened for so many reasons. And maybe just one of those minute reasons was to be an empathetic witness for you.
Right.
So that we could have this shared space of safety so that you can practice it here and then go take it out in your life.
Yeah.
And then that makes every dumb decision I ever made worth it. Yeah.
And it's different than, say, confession, which is like, oh, I'm confessing this to God and to God's emissary. And I'm not, like knocking Catholicism, but there is something about, if you knew a little more about the priest's follies, it might be easier.
Yeah. Of course. Well, so that's why I love in here. I don't believe in a power dynamic in which I have it all figured out or I hold the truth. There's ethical power dynamics and there's reasons that therapists don't do certain things. It's just like, and like you were saying, there's tons of therapists that are on a more progressive end. I didn't have experience with them. And it was the first person that when I did that too, which was something that like I was super ashamed of, that opened up this whole idea of like, I am not my behavior.
Yeah.
And my behavior can change. So one thing when I was thinking back, because, you're a great example of how like you don't come and see me every week. This isn't like ongoing, indefinite work where like you always have to see me, right? I haven't seen you in a while in a professional sense. And I was thinking back on our work and I was like, what are the kind of standout things that I remember from working with Josh? And one of them was in the very beginning. I introduced the boundary pyramid. We started talking about it and you were like, hold on a minute. And I'm going to language it super high level, but it felt like betrayal in some of your relationships that you had. And we kind of processed through that. And that's such a normal thing for people when they approach setting boundaries. So how has the concept of boundaries shifted for you where maybe now it doesn't feel like betrayal?
Wait, can I just clarify something? The sense of setting boundaries felt like it would have been a betrayal of certain relationships. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, it's interesting. I mean, just to clarify, like there was a time I think where we were weekly, like I was really seeing you a lot. Yeah. It's now like, now you're on a little more like break glass in case of emergency kind of situation.
Yeah. As needed, I call it.
As needed. And sometimes I just need to leave you a 5-minute voice note, you know, which you're always so gracious about responding to. Sometimes fear will just flare up and I know there's like, you're where I need the arrow to go. Like I need you to hear it for some reason. But, yeah, you know, I was raised in a family that was, both implicitly and explicitly, there was a kind of like, we don't talk bad about our family. You know, other families are crazy. We're normal. We don't talk about this stuff. So when I started to really unpack some of the family stuff and childhood stuff, it felt like it was something that I had been ordered actually not to do or forbidden to do. Yeah. And my parents are not villainous on any level. They just were trying to negotiate their own pretty crazy childhoods and trying to create what they thought was like a very safe, non-dramatic childhood for me.
And they probably succeeded. It probably was a better childhood.
It was. And in some ways, though, because things were forbidden in my home, like raising your voice, getting angry, being too sad for too long. Like there were things that like the kind of like darker emotions were really forbidden. So I started wearing masks. I started wearing like, I'm okay. You don't have to worry about me. I'm okay. I'm a good ambassador for this family but I had a number of therapists point out to me, and I think this is so right, that there was something in me that was longing to express and be authentic and be emotional and play more keys on the kind of emotional keyboard than I had been told were available to me. So what a brilliant thing that this like 15 or 16-year-old was like, I'm going to start acting. I'm going to get on stage. I can't get angry in my house, but I can get angry on stage in a David Mamet play. And I can say these words and play a Hollywood producer who's really angry. And it was my first like tiptoeing into emotionality, you know? And I look back and I think, man, that 15 or 16-year-old had some really good instincts. I also think that, you know, my career has varied and the fuel that powers it has changed. But the fact that a 16-year-old boy like decided what I was going to do, and I'm 51 and I'm still doing it, is pretty extraordinary, I think.
Without even realizing what he was doing, right? Like this isn't like a conscious choice where like, I can't feel my feelings, I'm going to go act. It was just like, I have this need, and that's what happens. We will meet our need, albeit maladaptively sometimes, but that was a beautiful adaptive.
Yeah. But also I think a lot of our work has been, I don't know if you call it parts work but there's a lot of aspects of parts work in your work, but really like naming the inner child and the age at which they're having a real moment of feeling unsafe. And you kept reminding me that, you know, there's a conscious adult in the room now, and it's you, you know? And the feeling of like, This is another great quote I heard. Feelings are like children. You don't want them driving the car, but you don't want to stuff them in the trunk either. So you kind of have to just have them in the back seat, and you say, we'll be there just 1 second. You've really got to tend to them. And I learned how to be so much more compassionate with myself. And what's the phrase you say all the time, but it's like, I hear you. I'm going to figure this out. We're going to be fine. And if I can't figure it out, we'll find someone who can help us.
Mm-hmm. That's my mantra for my inner child.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that helped me a lot. I didn't realize how much either the wounded adolescent, I kind of think of it as like, there's a 5-year-old, there's like a 10 or 11-year-old, and then there's like maybe it's like 5 and 14 or something are like big ones for me. And it's kind of like knowing who's talking and knowing what their core fear is and what their core primary need is. I'll send you, there's a Robert Bly poem, Robin, that my friend sent me that I thought was so extraordinary. And I'll send it to you, but it's essentially about, there's a boy in you, maybe a girl. She's kept you alive a lot, but she also gets crazy ideas. And the kid's trying to keep you alive right now. And it's something like, they have 6 ideas, 5 of them are terrible. Mm-hmm. And they're speaking to you right now, Mm-hmm. And, just, when people ask, like, what age do you feel like? Like, I don't think I ever felt my age. I kind of do now in a strange way. But that's because I updated myself through the work I did with you and through others, that I can really own being a man. And for so long, it was hard for me to even say that I was a man. And I was a man for a long time, like there was something so childish, childlike fear, also like a childlike need to impress and seduce and woo, I think I don't know if you know that quote, but like every act of communication, they say, is either a call for love or an expression of love. And I think so much of my early part of my life, or the first half of my life, was this call for love, this deep hunger and shriek, for love. And I'm transitioning now into my life being more of an expression of love, that it's not, I don't feel the brokenness I used to feel in so many moments that it still comes up. I'm not, I still need to call you every once in a while. It's like, I haven't vanquished these voices or these, whatever, these children, but there is some part of me that is transitioning into the kind of second half of life where I feel more whole and complete, and then I can be more generous and of service. Yeah.
And I'm clapping. And I think I had something similar where I was like, ooh, mature. That sounds boring. Like, even though I longed to not be like behind in comparing myself to other people, it was like, oh, maturity feels boring. And the maturity that comes with this work and developing a conscious part of self is full of peace and joy and attunement. And man, like, I wouldn't trade it for anything, Josh. I wouldn't trade it for the intensity of a toxic relationship or any of the highs that I had before. And like, truly, you couldn't sell that to me until I experienced it in my body.
Yeah. My friend Ian says this great thing. He says, peace is an acquired taste.
Yes, you told me that before.
Yeah. And it's so true. Like I think like, I have another friend who I said, I'm worried that a healthy relationship will feel like drinking chamomile tea all the time, which is what I'm drinking literally right now. But my friend Mandy said this great thing to me, and she was married and she had a kid. She struggled with relationships for years, but she said, have you ever tried to change your diet? And I said, yeah. She goes, those first bites of kale are just so miserable, but then your palate adjusts and then you start craving the healthy food. and it's the junk food that repulses you rather than you craving it. It's a similar thing, you know?
It reminds me of one of my favorite Buddhist sayings that I butcher all the time, and I probably said it to you at some point in the work, which is that if you walk into the room and you feel a level connection with someone, run.
Right.
And I remember hearing that. I think like a therapist had told me when I was younger, and I was like, well, where am I supposed to be then if it's not a level 10 connection? She was like, a 6, a 7, even an 8 is great. I was like, oh, I'd rather die.
Right.
Like, that sounds so boring.
Right.
Right. But the 10 is the attachment wounding going unconsciously, like, jackpot, we've found the same energy and maybe we can have a corrective experience with this one.
But in fact, we're just going to torture each other.
I'm attracting the same energy that wounded me. And without the resources and without that person having other resources, we're just going to re-traumatize ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And it's all like an unconscious thing that goes on. So if you don't mind sending that poem, I'll link it underneath the podcast so we can all enjoy it. But you bring up a great point too, Josh, that like, I never want to sell that these aha moments of like, I used to suffer and now I don't. And I never feel these feelings. Like, you will feel shame again. You will feel guilt. You will feel engulfment.
Yeah.
It's just that trauma responses, there's no agency in it. There's no choice. It's just reaction. And when we understand the parts of self, which takes a little bit of time, that wasn't like we did one session and you were like, got it. Here's my kid. Here's my teen. Got it. I know how to parent. It took a little bit of time, right?
Yep.
But when you can see those things, we implement that pause to be like, okay, this is happening. I'm in shame. I'm in engulfment. Now, what do I want to do? What's the healthiest choice? And that in itself is conscious, because you can't choose and be in a trauma response. That's not how it works. That means we're out of the trauma response of these default settings of either going without boundaries towards the thing that's hurting you or protecting yourself so much you cut off the connection.
Yeah. And another thing that really helped me was how I labeled things and how I talked to myself. Like, instead of saying like, I am sad, it's kind of like different, like indigenous traditions will say, sadness is present, as almost like if it's a rain cloud or something, like it's not the totality of your being. Another teacher used to say, if you have a pain in your finger, it's all your energy is going to that pain, but there's a whole body, a whole world of non-pain that you're not paying attention to, And I think it's very easy, I think, to get tripped up in healing work where we fetishize pain, we become our pain. It's really easy to get stuck in perpetual healing. And it's like, no one talk to me, I'm healing. We can get very dramatic.
That can be like its own form of avoidance.
Yeah.
Right there. Yeah.
And I knew that I wanted to be a man of action. I wanted to be in the world, and so I didn't want to get tripped up there. And I think I appreciated our work because it felt so action oriented. It felt like you would give me homework assignments, and I'm a good student. Like, I like a good homework assignment where I can say, look, I did it and I learned something, so that was all really valuable to me.
And what's really neat? I actually never call them homework. I call them invitations for that very reason, that sometimes we bring.
Yeah, there was no demand that we finish them. I finished them. I remember that.
No,
yeah.
Just an invitation, right? But this reminds me a little bit. I haven't said this on the podcast, and by no means I identify with all different types of religion, and Christianity being one of them. But I read the Bible one time, like for shits and giggles. Like, I was like, okay, I grew up with this thing. I never read it. Maybe I should just see now from like my point of consciousness how I receive it. And there was this one story, and it was like, it's not even a big story, and I can't remember where it is in the Bible, but Jesus is walking through a town, and this is when he's healing everybody, and everybody knows who he is. And he's walking by this guy, and he's laying in a pool of blood. And the guy's going, Jesus, please heal me. Like, I'm dying. I need healing. And Jesus kind of looks over his shoulder and just looks at him and goes, live, and keeps walking. And when I read it, I was like, oh, that is cold. Like, excuse me. I didn't know Jesus was cold like that. But then when I really sat with it, that was the healing. Like you can kick around in your own blood all you
Yeah.
want. We have free will. And there's been so many times where I've kicked around in my blood and I actually think, or my suffering, I should say, I actually think it's a part of the healing process where we realize there's a part of us that is somewhat addicted or holding on to the familiar pain because it's a risk to step out of that and go into something new. It calls on like a new version of you that might not be all that practiced. So
Yeah.
I love that story because it was a reminder not to shame us for kind of sitting in the victimness of what's happened in our life. And like I said earlier, like sometimes we are legitimately a victim, but that there is agency in how long you kick around in that pain.
Yeah. I think that that's 100% true. And I feel like I've had to say to myself, live, a
Mm.
number of times where, it's just because I'm so word oriented and so, um, I like finding different ways to phrase things and look at things. Sometimes I can just get lost in the forest of, words and theories. And sometimes you just have to go for a jog. Sometimes you just have to call the person and make an amends. Sometimes, there's something about action that the older I'm getting, I find is actually the best thing for me, the very best thing for me. Otherwise, I stay poolside, and I become like a person of theories, and I find less and less use for that the older I get.
I think you are such a great example of how there's times where you can live in your head and there's times that was a trauma response and that was safer for you.
Yeah,
And then there's times that you can live in your body and like neither one in isolation is all that helpful. Like if we just go in our head or we just go into our feelings, but when we integrate those two things, then we influence a healthier, more aligned action. And there's sometimes in the work for people, and this is why this is so nuanced. It might not be true for every single person, where it's actually better to focus on your actions than like identifying with your feelings.
yeah,
And then sometimes it's great to like touch into your feelings and get the intel because I believe feelings are messengers. They're communicating a need. But there's been times in my life where I'm like, I just feel like a piece of trash and I feel like I'm not good enough. And that experience of myself, I can't believe. So let me look at my actions. And then I'll look at my actions and go, well, that's the actions of a really healthy person.
right.
Like, okay, I can give credit to that. So sometimes it's really nice to kind of step out of the noise of like emotions and thoughts
Yeah.
and kind of focus on your action if that recalibrates you back to self.
And I also am pretty aware at this point that like the voice in my head is often a wildly unreliable narrator. Like it's not an objective kind of like, I'm seeing the truth and I'm letting you know the truth, even though it will say, this is the truth and I'm letting you know the truth. I heard someone say once, why do I believe the dark negative thoughts in my head, mostly about myself, are truer than the ones that are kinder and more compassionate? And I don't know why the brain is designed that way, but it does seem, I mean, they've done studies that like negative thoughts are like Velcro to our brain. They just kind of ask any actor, do you remember the positive reviews? And they'll say no. But they can quote the negative reviews verbatim.
Yeah. And we do that to ourselves,
Yeah.
right? We're like the only, I might have shared this with you too, Josh. Like for me, when I would isolate, I would call it going off to my own little island. And
Yeah.
that felt so much safer because getting away from people or creating emotional distance felt safer. But then I realized one day that there was a loudspeaker on that island and it said horrible things to me.
Yeah.
And I was alone with it.
Yeah.
And I went, I can't be on this island by myself. And I
Right.
think that's what you were describing about. Sometimes you need to leave me that 5-minute voice note. And it's like letting someone else in that island other than that voice that we can't trust its experience of us.
yeah, it's the kind of 12-step thing of living your life in consultation. Like you need, I can't tell you the amount of, guys that I love in 12-step, including myself, that if you're alone with your thoughts too much, you can have the most insane thought that starts to feel like the most logical, pristine thought you've ever had. And you have to like call a friend and be like, hey, just wanted to like crack open my skull for a moment and show you what's going on in there. And they can go, yeah, it sounds like you're in your sickness. Can you get outside and walk your dog? Like, can you not do that thing? Can you not fire that text? I'm glad you read it to me, but can you not send that?
And can you do anything
but that? Yeah.
Just believe that thought like would be in your best interest. I wanted to mention this, Josh, because you brought up like a term that I've used so many times with clients now, and I thought it just landed so well. You said one time in a session, I feel like I have a reoccurring condition. I don't know if you remember this. And I was like, oh my gosh, you do. And I do too. And it's shame and it's, relational trauma. And, maybe it's not diabetes and it's not some of these other physical reoccurring conditions. But I think sometimes we can go into this work and have an unrealistic expectation that we just get rid of all these things. Like I went to a therapist one time and said, I need to get rid of the shame thing.
Yeah.
And I wish, I don't recall exactly how she like responded, but I wish she would have been like, girl, no, you're never going to get rid of that shame thing. You're going to learn to manage it different.
Yeah. Yeah. Right? And that's where, working with a great coach or a therapist, 12-step, like figuring out a treatment regimen that really works for you, that becomes like your insulin shot that you use to keep your blood sugar levels at the right level. I agree with you. I mean, I found that just acknowledge, well, it's almost like you can't begin healing until you acknowledge you're sick. And that was so hard for me. Like it was an admission of failure where I came from, to say, I need help, or I don't know how to do this. I was really self-punishing around that stuff. But the moment I said, I need help, and this was the area I was bleeding out in the most. But the moment I said I needed help, the right people showed up, and it was, thank God. It makes me feel on some level that the universe is just waiting for us to jump in and start, that there's a benevolence. I know the universe can look cold and indifferent, but it feels to me that there's something about it that it's on our side. If you can really access that energy, it's kind of waiting for you to kind of direct it and say, hey, I'm here to help. I just can't intervene. That's not what I do, but I'm here to help.
And you know what it wants in my experience is for you to be authentic. The thing that you gave up so long ago, like that it is supporting you in being the most fully expressed version of you.
Yeah.
So I mean, we could literally talk for hours and hours. So I'm going to ask you a couple more questions and then we'll kind of round it out. But like, how did doing this work, the parts of self-work, the boundary work, the attachment work, how did it impact your capacity for intimacy? Because I know, because I've witnessed it, it's different than when I first met you.
Yeah. Well, I think that, you've been with me through two big relationships. And the first relationship that I got into not long after meeting you was someone that I had been in my life for a long time. We danced around each other for a while. And she was kind of like the archetype of what I had been attracted to for years. The first half of that relationship, I think, was like, seemed to be working. And the second half was an absolute disaster. Like everything just crashed. And it ended very dramatically, very suddenly. You'll remember all this very well. And it wasn't long after that. It was 3 or 4 months later that I met my wife, Jordana. But I remember when that relationship ended, and it ended literally in a hotel room in the Midwest. It sounds so tawdry, but I just remember something in me. It was like it broke, but it was also like an awareness, like whatever this is, whatever dynamic this is, and what I said, I am done with this. Like, I'm not going to do this again. I'm not going to find another person with as a level 10 connection, as you said, because that's what we had. I said, I'm not going to do that. And then I was a little bit lost and in the wilderness, but I went to Nashville and I started making a record, this album Eulogy that you know well, with my friends, Kyle, Corey, and Jeremiah, who all happened to be just dumb luck, happily married, all three of them. So I met Jordana halfway through the recording of that. I came back. I said, I met someone and I have a weird, quiet feeling about her. Like there was something, it wasn't, it was like something in me was like in seed form that felt really like nourishing and good and spiritually fit. And like, that's not the right word, but you know what I mean? Like it felt like aligned with my higher kind of stuff. And,
but different, right?
but way different, way different. And I think, Jordana's not in my industry, but she has an intensely acute and sensitive, she's just sensitive around how weird it is and how strange it can be to have people project things onto you and know you when you don't know them and all this stuff. But I think, like I said, that there was a part of me that thought there's some rotten thing in me. And that if a partner sees it, they're going to bolt or I'm going to bolt. And now 3.5 years in and we're married and like she's seen that thing. She's seen it. Mm-hmm. I've seen her thing. Mm-hmm. And we're both like 100% here. Like we're 100% yes to it all. And that to me was like the story I needed rewritten. I needed to know that I could be angry, impulsive, impatient, gross, lusty, joyful, exuberant. Human. What? Human. That I could be all the things and I would be loved not in spite of them, but because of them. That it was like all of it was welcome. And then I had to look at the parts of me that had learned those rotten lessons where I realized, oh, I'm not always welcoming of them in another. So that was also further work I had to do. But it's funny because like, you know this from seeing clients, like catch them on a Tuesday versus a Friday. It's a totally different session, right?
Yes.
And like my wife and I are just like having a very sweet 24 hours. Like Nelson got into something and he was kind of pukey this morning, but we were like, we just had such a lovely kind of wake up. And I had Nelson on one side and my wife on another. And I was just like, the two beings I love the most are in this room right now in this bed with me. And I never saw that for myself because I always thought I will be in perpetual discontent around relationship. I will perpetually feel like I'm with the wrong person or I can't show up for this or I will always be hatching, an exit. And, I don't want to uncork the champagne too early because we're early in this relationship, but I do know that she's seen that part of me that I was scared of anyone seeing. And she was like a full yes to it. And she loved it. She loved it. She was like, I'm here for all of that, And that was a lot of work, led me not only to have the courage to be that in front of her, but also pick a person who could be with that. And you know what I mean? Like it was just I just chose a different kind of person.
And just witnessing it, like it's hard for me not to cry, Josh. Like you sent me your wedding video with some of your vows and I literally like collapsed on the couch and sobbed. I was like, oh my God, it all works out, right? So what you're describing, right, is that shame doesn't allow us to be human. Like, you can't have those emotions and you can't be messy and we can't show like our shadow parts because it would cost us the connection. But This is what's a healthy corrective experience, that you can be authentically yourself and authentically human and still be in connection. And that you can wake up with that dog and Jordana and it can be enough.
Yeah.
Like, the messiness of it even can be enough. And that we don't know what's going to happen in the future, right? Because sometimes I'll tell clients, like, listen, I wouldn't pay you to read my future. Like, that's not a great skill set of yours. But in this moment, like, you choose it. And in this moment, it's enough.
Yeah.
And in this moment, you both show up. And like, what evidence of your healing that you can tolerate that and manage it.
Yeah. And also, to my surprise, like, there's so much joy in it. Like, I thought it would be, and maybe it's just we've gotten used to, some of these spikier edges just being a fact of our relationship and just being present. But one of her things in her vows was this Thich Nhat Hanh quote, which says, we must love another in such a way that they feel free, And for an avoidant, for her to say that on our wedding day was like, literally like masterful. Like, it was genius to say, like, I want you to feel free in this relationship. And one of the most startling things about it is that I feel freer in this relationship than I felt unattached and rolling around and doing whatever I wanted with whoever I wanted. It was so counterintuitive, but so has proven to be so true.
I could not be happier. And you're human, and relationships are cycles of harmony, disharmony, repair. So it's not to sell a fantasy that like we sail off into the sunset and everything's great and your avoidance never comes back up.
Right.
But it's a safe enough container to like bring it and not have to leave it to manage it.
Well, that's another thing. We talk so much about those three words: harmony, disharmony, and repair. And that was not something I was taught in school. It was not something I learned in my house. My home growing up, my parents were like, harmony, harmony, harmony. Why are you disturbing the harmony? We want harmony. And disharmony is as natural as any weather pattern or mood or body. Disharmony is like inevitable. But what I learned from you and what I've continued to learn in my relationship is the intimacy deepens, the connection deepens in repair. But if you don't allow yourself to get in the disharmony, you don't get the sweet opportunity for repair. So that's another thing that I do think my wife and I do really well, is we do repair really well. We don't like to stay. I mean, sometimes we'll stretch it out and be like, I'd like to stay angry just a touch longer. And we kind of give each other permission for that. And that's okay too. But like, our repair is, and I also have to keep learning that disharmony and repair is not a weakening agent. It's a strengthening agent. And when I get to the other side of the repair and we feel closer, I realize like, oh, we're closer now on the other side of this than we were in the harmony that preceded this.
Right. Isn't that wild? But I think you have to, the disharmony part to the repair part requires vulnerability.
Yeah.
And you have to trust yourself enough that like you could show a little bit more of you or tell a little bit more of the truth or ask for what you need to be able to step into that repair. And that's why the work that I do and the work you've done with me is rooted in your relationship to yourself. Like everybody comes to me because of a relationship outside of themselves.
Right.
But it ultimately leads here. And then what we develop inside and internally, we can then share with the people that we're in a relationship with.
And I think that it starts individually, but I think it can be applied collectively. I think, a lot is provocative and upsetting about our national politics, but like, there's something about this drive to make America like perfect and blameless and always in the right and always good, which feels to me like really like a bad idea. And I also don't think America should be dragged through the mud and we've done nothing great and there's nothing to be celebrated here. I also think that's false. I think that a more dimensional, well-rounded, shadow including picture, both collectively and individually, is always going to be better. It's just always going to be better because we walk with more humility when we realize, like Jung, we're capable of all these things, but we're also capable of the greatest benevolence, the greatest compassion, the greatest, movements toward bettering things for ourselves and others. And it really alarms me when I see this effort to stamp out more of the shadowy parts of both our history and our politics. And individually, when you see someone doing that, I don't trust people who aren't alert to their flaws,
No, no. No. And what I love about this work is everything's a relationship. So what we see in our own relationship, like you can see in the relationship that is happening in America right now, or people's relationship to America, and all these things can be applied. I haven't thought about it that way, but damn, I agree. It's scary a little bit, right?
Yeah.
And so, Josh, again, I could talk to you forever, but I was going to just skip a question, but I can't, because I remember when your album came out, the Eulogy Volume 1, and you had like been messing around with some songwriting, and you would send them to me, and I would like sit down and I'd be so excited to be you and your guitar. And then I distinctly remember when you went to Nashville and you had all this space. And for some reason, because I use a lot of intuition in the work, I was like, I have a feeling that like, there's a reason you're going like to Nashville and you're doing this thing, and it's going to give you the direction for the next thing. And here we meet Jordana, and you put this album out and you make all these amazing relationships. But I knew the album came out, and I was like, okay, I'm going to like clean up and I'm going to put my AirPods in. I'm going to listen to it. And as soon as it started, I ended up sitting in my bed, like gripping and just sobbing because, your songwriting, it's like, gosh, I was watching you take everything that you were going through and put it through this lens. And it was so beautiful. And there was this one song, Josh, it's my ultimate favorite song of yours. I've never even told you this. And it's called What If, from Eulogy Volume 1. And in it, like, there's a saying that I say sometimes in the work, like, don't lace up the running shoes. Because for those of us that have an avoidant attachment, that seems like the safest thing. And so sometimes I'll even tell people like, hey, just keep them by the door. Yeah. But like before you lace them up, call me.
Yeah.
And I'm listening to the song, and I hear the lyrics. What if I don't lace up the running shoes? What if I let myself be loved by you? And when I listened to it, I was like, man, if there has ever been an avoidant attachment anthem, like, it is this one. It's so relatable. And in fact, I've sent it to a couple clients, and one of them was like, dude, that song is like, it just like, I feel so seen. And like, why this thing is so great. Why do I want to run away from it? And so I was just wondering, because what you just described, you've been in a relationship for 3 years, you're navigating the cycle of harmony, disharmony, repair. What's it like to not lace up the running shoes and to let yourself be loved now?
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you. I totally stole that line from you. That was my, I guess, wink to you in our work. But there's probably other ones on the album. But that's also a deep cut on the record. It's not like it wasn't one of the singles. It's like, I'm so delighted to hear that it landed, because I do feel like that song is a very meaningful one for me. And also the other thing I like about that song, it's kind of a toe tapper. It's not a morose song. It's a love song, and it's really, but it's got a pulse to it. And I think there was something about getting married that was the very thing that looked like, the jail bars slam shut and you hear the key turn. Mm-hmm. That was my fear. That was my fear, that marriage would feel like that. But I wonder if Jordana will be okay with me telling this story. I think she will. And if it's not,
you can tell it. And if she's not,
yeah. I had some avoidance flare up in the first year of our relationship. I was really like testing her and me and whether this was real, and also like the confusion of like, am I falling in love or am I falling into addiction? It was like kind of a classic, like once you're alert to this stuff, you're like, okay, I've called it love before and it's turned out to be, messy and toxic and complicated. So I was very nervous, and I would sometimes be all in, both feet. And then sometimes I would just pull away and shut down and go to my little island. And this was before we got engaged, but I remember we were in Los Angeles and Jordana just kind of had it with this cycle. Mm. And she said, look, I love you. I want to be with you. I would like to marry you. I believe in marriage, but I also believe in divorce. And I need you to know that if this continues, I'm not going to stay. Like she was basically just saying like, I have too much kind of self-respect to be going on this cycle. And something in me just went, like, I just remember being strangely delighted by her saying that. One, because it was like, she's a formidable character. Like she's not going to be knocked around by my stuff if I'm not working on it.
Yeah.
She has endless patience, by the way, for me working on, like if I have to hop on a meeting or say I got to call Robin or someone else, she's like, go. She really clears space for that. But I think that like not lacing up the running shoes has led me to feel like, well, why would I? Like, why would I? I feel good here. It feels nice here. There's nowhere else to run to. There's no better place to be than at this apartment in Brooklyn. Like, why would I leave this, you know? And it's funny, I wrote that song before I met her, you know?
Yeah.
But in some ways, in as much as I am prophetic, which I don't claim to be, but sometimes I catch something, you know, that's floating around in the ethers. And sometimes my songs are pep talks to myself or like little prayers where the higher part of me knows something that the lower part of me hasn't fully assimilated, and the higher part kind of talks to that lower part in the song. So then I perform the song or play the song or listen to the song, and I get the benefit of that wisdom, which is I just kind of caught on a good day of writing. So yeah, I mean, the benefits have been, they're still ongoing. They're still revealing themselves. But I think like, yeah, there's just something about, I always say this to people who are in distress. I say, don't make any sudden moves, you know, like just pause. Like that's a very Al-Anonic thing, is like, they say for every year you have in recovery, you get 1 second more of pause before reacting. And I feel that I've gained a lot of like a storehouse of like of the ability to pause and not say the thing that's going to be hurtful, not break the plates or smash the glasses, or I mean, I was never a rager like that, but you know what I mean? Like not do something that's really, I love that Terry Real line where he says a real sin in relationships, he calls it unbridled self-expression.
Yes.
Where it's just like, I'm just going to tell you how I feel, but I'm not going to be thinking about you're a person on the other end of this who's going to potentially be really hurt. So, you know, I just, every day that I don't lace up the running shoes, and I don't want, if Jordana listens to this, which I'm sure she will, I don't want her to think I'm even staring at the running shoes. Like I've just gotten to the point where it's like, I know where they are. If I need them, she has her own if she needs them. But right now, where else would we be? This is really nice here.
Yeah. Well, you know, we haven't talked about attachment styles yet, but something you and I have talked about as a way to show up to our avoidance is voice and choice.
Yeah.
Because ultimately what we're the most afraid of when avoidance is up is being stuck or trapped in something.
Yeah.
And so to think that we can't run out of there is the ultimate worst feeling. Right?
Yeah. And I called a friend when I was in my head about something. I don't even remember what. That's what, you know, I have a friend who says, a sponsee will call him and start going off and goes, hey, before we go on, how did that thing last Tuesday resolve itself? And he's like, they never remember what was going on last Tuesday. It's like just the drama of the day. So I don't even remember what I was freaking out about. But I called my friend and he listened to me and he goes, yeah, it sounds like you're just future tripping a little bit. And you're kind of locked in this idea that how it is right now is how it's always going to be forever. Mm. And that's one of the ways my mind in when I'm not spiritually fit, that's one of the things my mind does is it says, that's the avoidant boy in me who says, you're trapped. It's going to be this way forever. You got to get out. You're going to be miserable. This is just a snapshot of the rest of your horrible life. Go, go, go. Lace up the running shoes. And then I can say, hey, bud, I hear you, but I promise you we're safe. We'll find someone to fix this. And if we don't, we'll get someone who can help us.
Right. Okay. So, Josh, as much as I would love to ask you every single question that I have on my list, I am going to let you go. But before I do, I'm going to ask you a series of questions that I ask all of my guests just to bring some individualness to this work.
Yep.
So, are you ready?
Sure.
Okay. So, what's a belief about yourself that you've had to unlearn?
That I'm not capable of love or lovable in some fundamental way.
Word. What's a small daily practice that helps you feel connected to yourself?
I have these things I developed called the M's, and it's move, like move my body, meditate, make, be creative, muse, have some time for dreaming away from my phone, and I forget the other one. But I try when I do my 5 M's in the day, I have a pretty good day.
Okay, I love that. What is one book that has deeply impacted your personal growth?
There's a book that a guy wrote that my friend John gave me that I've given to so many people. And it's about looking at the Bhagavad Gita, which is this beautiful Indian text, as a way to look at, what's it called? This journey of your life, the story of your life. I'll get you the name and you can put it in the notes.
Okay.
But it is so terrific. I'm going to reread it because it was so inspiring. And I've given it to some like pretty heady friends who I think wouldn't like a book like that. And they were totally bowled over by it. The great journey of your life, the great story of your life. I can't remember, but I'll find it for you. Terrific.
I don't know it. I'm learning. I'm like adding so many to my book queue when I have guests on because there's so many that I haven't read, and I feel like I've read so many. Okay, so what's a piece of advice that you have received in your life that changed everything or changed something on your path?
Oh my God.
I know it's hard.
I mean, I would just say like the work of Richard Rohr has helped me spiritually more than anyone else. Like, I think he's very quietly like one of the greatest, certainly spiritual writers, but thinkers and philosophers on the planet right now. He's quite old. I don't know how long he'll be with us, but he's leaving behind an enormous storehouse of wisdom. Another book that maybe we can throw this one in there too, Falling Upward by Richard Rohr, about the second half of life, first half of life, second half of life, is just an absolutely gorgeous book that made me, as someone who kind of has a puer aeternus, eternal child kind of thing going on. It was the first book that made me not afraid to get older and age. Yeah. It's beautiful. It's like a roadmap for eldership, Falling Upward.
Ooh, okay. I'm going to check that out too. I've never read that. So
the great work of your life. That's what the book is called.
The main work of your life?
The great work of your life.
The work of your life. Okay. So what's something that you do now that your younger self would be proud of you for?
Getting married and taking care of a dog.
Yay. Okay. I'm going to try to do this without crying. This is the hardest part when I have you guys on this podcast. Josh, thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here. When I saw you and met you for the first time in person was the day after my soulmate dog died. And I came to see you perform. And I can't tell you, like, I brought my mom and she still talks about it, how like we both needed that day. And it was so beautiful to watch you perform, and the depth in your performance and lyrics, but also the humor. Like, you are so freaking funny. And I walked out, I was like, Josh, get a one-man show. Stat. It was so good. But you so graciously, after we met each other in person for the first time, you offered to come on here. And that just meant the world to me, because I know you're very busy and very discerning of where you bring your energy and time. So thank you so much. This conversation was a gift to me. Your honesty, your vulnerability, and the way you translate your own growth into art and wisdom is something I will never stop being grateful for. And I'm sure everyone listening, I've told Josh before, I'm like, Josh, you could like do what I do for a living. Like Josh could do his own emotional and mental health podcast maybe one day. But for those of you that are listening, you can find Josh's music, Eulogy Volume 1 and 2, on all streaming platforms. And if you ever get the chance to see him live, please go. It's an amazing experience you won't regret. And his newsletters, which we haven't had a chance to talk about. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about your newsletters before I plug them.
Yeah, it's just something I've been writing since I think 2016, 17 maybe. Just essays and just personal reflections about where I'm stumbling and what I'm thinking about and where I'm succeeding, and not career-wise, but like they're a lot of what we've been talking about here, in a every 2 or 3 months I try to get one out. It's been a while. I got one out, I think, a couple of days ago, but I guess for people who are on this journey of self-discovery and self-acceptance and looking for more inspiration and fellowship along the way, you can check me out at Substack.
Yes, I have subscribed and I look forward every time I see it in my inbox. And I think it's just so you, Josh. It's so thoughtful and intellectual and deep, and always said in a way that's different than the way I think. And so I always appreciate reading those. Also, Josh has his own podcast out called How We Made Your Mother, where Josh, and is it the creator of
one of the co-creators, Greg Thomas? Yeah.
Okay, one of the co-creators revisit the making of How I Met Your Mother with humor, heart, and depth. And as always, thank you to everyone for listening, to everyone who's brave enough to walk up to some of these scary things and tune into this podcast every week. So next week, we're going to continue our work on parts of self, and we're going to be talking about your maladaptive adult, which is the part of us that can take the wheel when old patterns like fear, unhealed pain, and such try to run the show. This is a very important part of the healing puzzle, and we're going to continue on what Josh has lived and embodied now, which is understanding his parts of self and being able to reparent them from a more conscious place. So until then, take care.
Wait, Robin, can I say one more thing?
Of course.
I've said this to you privately, but I just want to say, like, I really consider it like just such a stroke of good fortune that Ben sent me to you. Our work was so rich and so provocative and scary sometimes, but it was like, I just look at myself right now, and at that moment in 2020, the life I'm living right now was not available to me. And I'm glad that I had enough self-awareness to know, like, I actually need some help here, like in a really active way. And I'm so glad that the fates led me to you, and I love the work you do. And I've never sent anyone to you that has not been absolutely delighted and transformed. And so I'm just so glad you're out here doing this work. And I'm so glad we're friends, and you have a very special place in my heart. Thank you.
Oh my goodness. I mean, I can't even put into words like how grateful I am to the universe, and how much confirmation it is that it knows exactly what it's doing, that like I get to know you, I get to know your heart. So Josh, like from the bottom of my heart, thank you for trusting me. Thank you for letting me see you, like maybe being one of the first people that you let witness you, that it was safe enough to do that. And now so many people get to do that, and you get to do that in your marriage. And I don't even know what to say. I'm just so grateful. And I think that this is what's so beautiful about this work, is like these deep connections. Like, you will always have a place in my heart. My door will always be open for you. I will always be there for you. And I can't wait to continue to share all the successes and all of the amazing opportunities that are coming your way. So thank you for saying that.
Thank you.
I love you.
Love you too.
Okay. Everybody, thanks for listening, and I'll see you next week. That's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for being here and for doing this work. If this episode resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Come connect with me over on TikTok at Robin Breckenridge, or Instagram at Coach with Robin, where I share even more insights, tools, and conversations around boundaries, self-trust, relational healing, and so much more. And just a quick reminder, this podcast is for educational and personal growth purposes only. The insights and tools I share are based on my experience as a life and relationship coach and are meant for general guidance. Each person's story is unique, and the nuances of individual experiences can't always be addressed in this format. What's shared here may not be applicable to every situation, especially those involving abuse, oppression, severe mental illness, or systematic harm. If you or someone you know is in crisis, please seek support from a qualified mental health professional or emergency resources. Thank you for listening and for showing up for yourself in this way. Take care, and I'll see you next time.